Welcome to Reading Corner. We are still celebrating Women's History Month, and today we're going to be learning about an environmentalist. That's someone who cares about and studies the environment. Her name is Rachel Carson. This book is called Spring After Spring: How Rachel Carson Inspired the Environmental Movement. Let's find out more about her. This is a quote from her. It says, "In nature, nothing exists alone." I think that means that we're all connected more than we think sometimes. So we have to look at the pictures here. It's early morning, and then it's cheerily. It was dawn when the chorus began. Cheerily, Drew, Drew, cheer up. Phoebe, Jerry, Chilly, witchetty, witchetty. All these birds are making these noises, and look at Rachel. She's like, I love those noises. Rachel didn't want to miss a note. Peel, peel, caca, hello, cheer, cheer, cheerily, true, coo, coo, hoo, hoo, tickettle, buzz, caw, caw. As the midday warmed the earth, other musicians chimed in. Life and music were all around. Chirp, chirp, cheat it, buzz. Wait, 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 beep, 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 buzz, chip. And wonders big and small. You can see the trees and the animals. She's looking with a magnifying glass. Spring was Rachel's favorite time of year. As the sun set, she could hear the first bubbles of frog song. Crickets began their nighttime tune, and bats squeaked a lullaby. At home, there was a warm supper and a big family. Mom played the piano, and Dad sang songs and read stories. Rachel's favorites were those about the sea. As the days grew longer and warmer, the chattering, chirping, and hooting got louder, until the gathering calls from migrating birds meant that it was autumn. They were coming together for their long journey through the ocean of air to their wintering homes. Honk, honk, honk. But not everyone left. You can see they're in their caves and their winter dwellings. Snuggled under a warm blanket, Rachel drew pictures and wrote about the life she experienced all year. She read books about animals and imagined what their lives were like. Spring after spring, year after year, the birds arrived. Every season, Rachel watched, listened, and wrote, and like the nestlings, she grew quickly. Then one autumn, it was time for her to go off to college. She was sure she wanted to be a writer, until she looked through a microscope and saw a small world in a drop of water. Tiny sea plants and animals. Rachel was amazed and in love. She wanted to know more about the very small world made visible by a microscope. She had never been to the ocean and was scared to go in the water. To learn about the creatures in tidal pools, marshes, and the sea, Rachel decided that she would study biology. She put her writing aside. After she finished school, Rachel worked as a scientist and compiled information about the ocean. That reminds me of another person we learned about, Eugenie Clark, who also was studying in the ocean. Now for Rachel's job, she wanted to know what it was like to actually be underwater. She was still scared, but she went anyway. And it says here, in the fish world, many things are told by sound waves. Rachel began to write books about the sea. They were full of scientific detail and vivid descriptions of the lives of sea creatures that people could imagine those worlds. Rachel became a famous author. But there was something wrong. All around her, nature's voices were going quiet. So Rachel did what she does best. She closed her eyes. She watched closely and listened carefully and learned as much as she could about what was happening. Rachel put together scattered facts and found the answer. This is what scientists do. They try to solve problems and they try to understand the world. She's using all the information she has to try to understand what's going on with the animals. People wanted to kill bugs that ate their plants, bothered them, and sometimes even made them sick. Have you ever been bitten by a mosquito? Those are pesky little bugs. Chemists created new poisons to solve the insect problem that seemed to work and seemed to be harmless to other creatures and humans. These poisonous chemicals were quickly used everywhere in huge amounts because people thought they were safe. But Rachel found evidence that the poisons were not safe. And this shows how it gets into the different creatures, because we're all connected, and that if they're eating poison, it's eventually going to affect even us as humans because we're part of the food chain. Rachel wrote a book to tell people what she learned. Silent Spring created a huge ruckus. Some people were inspired to change, but many didn't believe Rachel. Eventually, President Kennedy took notice and began an investigation to find out what was true. Rachel was asked to come to Washington, D.C. and to defend her book. She was scared, but she went. Rachel's testimony in Washington and her writing in Silent Spring made people see that they have an effect on the environment and the other creatures that they share the world with. People were inspired to speak up. Congress passed new laws so that nature was treated with more care, and some of the more harmful chemicals were banned. Spring after spring, year after year, people celebrated the earth and the environment because Rachel showed them how beautiful and precious it is. But Rachel went home and continued watching and listening. In the morning, she went out among the tide pools and gathered specimens. In the afternoon, she carefully studied them and took notes on her observations. And in the evening, when the tide had gone out again, she returned each creature with great care, exactly in the spot she had found it, exactly where it belonged. Wow, that is really inspiring and very important to know that all of us, we have an effect on the environment and we should take care of it. I thought we could maybe do a little tracing and cutting today to make our very own tree that we can put up to remind ourselves to take care of our world. Let me show you how to do it. We are going to make a tree by tracing our arm and our hand. It's gonna look really cool. So here's an example of one that's finished. You can see that the brown is the trunk and the green is the leaves. So you're gonna start by gluing a rectangle piece of green paper actually right on to a tall brown piece of paper to make your trunk. So go ahead and glue that on. And you wanna make sure when you trace your hand that you're gonna put your hand up here to be the leaves of the tree and put your arm down here. Now you're gonna wanna ask a grown-up to help you trace this. Or you can maybe trace their arm too if you wanna practice tracing. So put your hand up, and so you're gonna go around and carefully go around your fingers and back down. Okay, and so now I'm ready to cut. And you'll see my tree come to life. So I'm gonna cut right here. This is the trunk. Up, 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 up. Cut this side of my trunk. And if you want to, you can use crayons or markers and you can add some creatures to your tree, like some birds. You could even put some, if you want to put some fruit like apples hanging from your tree, you can do that. And this is really good practice to follow along the lines and to practice your cutting skills. And make sure that you're always holding your hands away from where you're cutting because you don't want to cut your fingers. And you'll just keep on cutting it and keep on cutting it. And then by the end, you'll have a tree that looks like this, and it will remind you to take care of our earth. Thank you for reading with me about Rachel Carson, a woman who cares a lot about our earth. Every time you look at your tree, remember what she said, that in nature, nothing exists alone, and that we have to take care of our world. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.